Hello, I'm Tim Matheson, and I'm here visiting, in her words, from across the table. Tune in.
Tim, it is so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for being here.
Gretchen,
Very excited.
Renee, this is so great to be here with you guys. I appreciate that.
We told you before, this is a rare conversation that we're in love. Our parents were so excited. Our kids were so excited. I mean,
Bingo.
Yeah, right?
Hit it all.
I hit the demo. Okay, that's great.
You have hit it all.
Oh,
but
good.
when and our listeners heard it in the title of In Her Words Across the Table, and Renee and I had this idea that we wanted to start talking to more than just women and about careers and about reaching across the table and raising each other up. And what we both found reading your book, which thank you for the advanced copy,
Yeah.
we had so much fun reading, is how many people reached across the table to you. And we'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, because you talk about Lucille Ball, you talk about Sally Fields, you talk about your agent, but your mom and your grandmother and how they influenced your life. So we'd love to kind of start there in how this back and forth with these amazing women in your career really was for you.
Well, that was very astute, and I think a great observation. Thank you. I was raised by strong women. My mother and my grandmother, Southern women, Richmond, Virginia, Nashville, Tennessee, and my grandmother's parents had owned slaves. And so I grew up with her directing me to watch the civil rights demonstrations during the 50s on television and explaining to me what the importance of that was and what it was like, her growing up, and I never asked her enough questions and got enough information, So and it's one of the things that sort of prompted me to do this book, because I worked with Lucille Ball and Jackie Gleason and people that, from the golden age of cinema that had grown up in vaudeville. They were doing 3 to 5 shows a day. And so there was a certain technique and a certain discipline and craft that hasn't been passed down. And like my grandmother has passed to me and helped form who I was. That's why I wanted to write that book. But women has been such an important part of my life, and because I was raised by women. My grandmother, my sister, and my mother, and so I come at it from a perspective somewhat different than I guess all the boys that I grew up with, because they had a dad. I had no role model to sort of fashion myself after, and but in the business too, I can remember, I think it was Peter Bogdanovich, it might have been The Last Picture Show, the first time I was ever in a meeting with a female producer. I mean, because it was all men, it was all white men. I mean, it was when I was growing up, and and it was like, oh, this is the 70s, man. I mean, I guess something's going on here. And it was Polly Platt, I think it was, that became his wife. But it's been a very, very important part of my life. And I've been it helped me, I think, as an actor, be in touch with my emotions, and the feminine side of myself. So, and I wasn't afraid to do that.
Well, your mom also, you had talked a lot about it in your book in terms of your mom just kind of picking up and, she didn't really let, like, the world could knock her down, but then she just got right back out there, and that seemed to be something that you channeled a lot throughout your career, especially over the 7 decades or 6.5 decades.
Thank you. It's true. My mom was really, I mean, I realized it as I looked at my parents, they grew up during the Depression. Yeah. And so it affected them both in different ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My mother was resilient. She just says, got to get up and fight, and and you got to go at it again. And my dad was sort of just like, you can't fight City Hall, and what's the diff? Why make a fuss? And he sort of went along with things. And I mean, that was maybe his personality. And the first time I think that I learned of that was when my mother, they'd rented a place in Burbank, because my father I think he was a pilot, and he was teaching other pilots to fly. Mm-hmm. And at Lockheed, or, the Hollywood Burbank Airport now. And they had a house, and that my father thought they were renting. but my mother behind his back had bought it because she tried to convince him it was a good idea to buy it. And he thought the next depression was next week,
Okay.
around the corner. You know, I mean, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. He'd drive me around when he'd come to visit after they broke up, and said, I could have bought that house for $1,200, you know, in 1951 or 43 or whatever it was. And I said, why didn't you? And he said, I only made $50 a week. And but it's worth 16,000 now, you know, and today it's 1.6. So anyway, so his sort of failings taught me to get into real estate, which was the only way I ever kept any money from as an actor.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
One of the other things with you talk about, and that comes through is you're very vulnerable in the book. You share the good, the bad, and the ugly. But your mom did that. You talk about your mom. She was resilient. She did that, but she also was like you said, I need a year off. I've got to get my shit together. And what she did with you and your sister. So that strength and that vulnerability, do you feel like that also came from her?
I think so. I mean, both of my parents were alcoholics. And my mother, when she retired for the second time, called me one day. When she was, I think she was 80, because she retired. They forced her to retire from the county when she was a chief clerk at the municipal court. At 65, she had to quit. And then she went into another aspect of the business where she worked with an indemnity company that sponsored bail bonds, and she went to all the courts she used to work at and exonerated the bonds and, worked with them. And I think she did that for 15 years. And then she started getting lost and she retired from that. And she called me one day and she said, Tim, I've got a problem. And I said, what's going on? And she said, I find I'm drinking a lot. I start drinking at lunch and I want to stop. And I said, well, you know what? I'm coming down. I'll take you to an AA meeting and, we can fix this. We'll fix it. And I took her to an AA meeting and she said, it's not for me. I'll just quit. And I said, well, Mom, it's what everyone says, but I said, I'll do it with you. We'll both, so we both quit drinking. And she just did it.
Wow.
She just did it. And the ironic thing was she slowly developed Alzheimer's. So she passed when she was 91 and she'd forgotten that she wasn't drinking alcoholic wine. And I bought her this Ariel, this non-alcoholic wine, and I kept it at this restaurant where she went. And she had drank, she thought it was real. So she got high anyway. So it all worked out for the best. She was an optimist.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. In your book, I feel like reading it, there were 3 key themes that kind of popped up across the board. And it's like discipline, accountability, and escapism. And not in that order. In terms of when you first started going to the film, to watch films, you used it as an escape.
Yes.
And
yes.
I love kind of like the circuitous notion of the book in terms of how you finished the book and how you started the book in terms of the fireplace. It was fantastic. But when you think back on your career, it's like, has that escapism changed for you in terms of why? Because you used it for so long in terms of that you got to play different characters, you got to explore different characters and be different people. Now, as you reflect on it, what's that drive for you? Is it still escapism? Is it not?
Oh, I think it's a great sort of therapy to be an actor because you get to stop being yourself.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people get that. It's like, oh God, I can stop being me and be somebody else, or find a different part of myself in some other character, perhaps. But I do find, and the other thing I found, once I walked onto that set, there was a smell of history of all the movies that had been made, and they were the Howard Hughes stages where Desilu was RKO, and it was, I just felt at home, and I was, and these people were my family, and I think the ultimate sort of thing I took away from, and I take away from my work and all the lessons I've learned from the people that I've worked with is it's a family. And no matter what business you're in, the better you get along with everybody all around you, the more you can accomplish as a team rather than as just an individual. Just, oh, I'm going to run this. You got to do it my way. And, you know, that, and I've tried that as an actor and a director, and it's better off if as a team, you know.
Do you feel that it's changed? It's like, and I heard an interview with you where you talked a little bit about Henry Fonda and how he used to do needlepoint, and back then you used to never leave the set, even if it wasn't your take or your shot, right?
Yes.
Now you had mentioned that everybody kind of goes to their own trailers and they do their own thing. They're taking 10 conference calls. Do you feel like that's taking away from shows now in terms of not creating that family on sets as much anymore? Or
it can, you know, I don't think that many people stick around anymore.
Yeah.
It's sort of evolved into, I mean, you see these old pictures like, say, Gone with the Wind or those, and there's these women in these huge gowns, and they built slant boards that they could lean on.
Lean back, yeah.
So that they didn't sit down and crush the dress, but they could get off their feet, and it was to make them comfortable. You know, you can't go sit in your trailer. I mean, they didn't have trailers, but they can't go sit in your dressing room because you'll ruin the dress.
Yeah.
And you don't want to take it off because it'll take 25 minutes to get it back on. I guess it has changed in that regard. But you know, like I know with Virgin River, the show I'm doing now, it's still a family and it's still fun and we all love it. But you don't sit on the set as much. It can. I remember there was one director I worked with, Michael O'Herlihy. Dan O'Herlihy was an actor, and it was his brother, the Irish guys, and he would have all the actors sitting in a circle around him, and he didn't talk. He just wanted you to sit there, and if you could only talk about the shot or the scene, or run lines or anything, but you couldn't chit chat, and it made the work go faster, and it made the work better. But it was a discipline that you can't ask actors to do that. They got to make a call. They got to talk to their wife, you know, whatever, you know, their husband. I mean, it's, you know.
No, they're doing that. To Renee's point of the three themes, discipline, you know, came through, and like you talked about with your family. But one of the stories that just so stuck with me, you had, you know, huge success with Animal House, obviously, and your fame. And you talked about all the meetings that you had after that, and everybody wanted to meet with you, and everybody wanted to find a role for Tim Matheson. But and in the book, I love the lessons that you put in each, you know, that you pulled out of each story. That's such a fantastic piece. But you said that one of the questions that they ask you is, what do you want to do next? Who do you want to be? And you didn't have an answer. And you felt like that was, you know, kind of looking back. And is that a takeaway for, you know, for actors now, for creatives now, to really define who they want to be? Do you feel like that was something that, would things be different if you had an answer, or weren't, you know, looking back, I
think so. I mean, they're looking for a clue. Is who are you?
Right.
You know,
right.
what is it you do? Do you sing and dance? You know, are you all muscled up and are going to be, you know, like one of the X-Men, or what is it you do? You know, and like, I think it's always best, had I, you know, been at that point smart enough to give them an answer, you know, at least then they could say, okay, you know, like I want to do Westerns, or I want to do, you know, romances, or, you know, things. But studios were, especially good at sort of BSing you about whatever you wanted to hear. You know, I mean, I after Animal House, I went over, Fox offered me this movie called Dreamer about sort of a working class guy who worked in a bowling alley and wanted to go become a professional bowler. And I said, and I was a student of independent, you know, foreign films, and you know, Richard Harris had done a movie called oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it now. It's Sporting Life.
Oh, okay.
And it was about a blue collar guy in a working class and a professional athlete, and it was a real edgy kind of film. And I said, if this movie is going to be like that, I'll do it. And they went, oh, sure, great. And it wasn't, you know. I mean, it turned into something that was just soft and gummy, and you know, except Jack Warden was in it, and I got to work with him, and you know, but so studios, but it's best if you've got the answer and if you have more of a direction. I didn't know, you know. I mean, I didn't know what that was my basically first adult movie,
Right,
you know, other than
right.
Magnum Force. I mean, which I was killed right away. Third cop through the door. So.
Well, since we're on the Animal House, since we got there, we won't ask too many questions because it's
Yeah,
We're a little obsessed.
but you know, there was so much going on, and obviously the one question that you were asked all the time was, what was it like to work with John Belushi, right? And I guess one of my questions for you around that, though, is when you think back, you know, there's so many people who talk about how, you know, alcohol and drugs and that whole kind of cast of characters, SNL and so forth, they thought that they got their talent from doing that, right? And he fell into that, or it was a vice. You know, when you're now, there's like a whole new generation Hollywood that's not like non-alcoholic brand tequilas or non-tequila or non-alcoholic wine, you know, and that mentality has seemingly shifted a little bit in terms of this kind of new Hollywood that seems to be coming up. But looking back on Animal House, you had so much discipline. You talked a lot about how you would actually spend more time studying your lines in Animal House and practicing than actually kind of partying with the guys or with that whole team. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of on set and how you kind of kept yourself back from, I guess, having a lot of having that type of fun?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I experimented, you know, like with maybe smoking pot, or I mean,
Yeah.
I once when I was doing Shakespeare, somebody gave me a hit of a joint, and it was in the middle of, I was doing Henry IV Part 2, which I had a smaller part in, and I was playing Romeo as well. I would never have done that if I was playing Romeo. So, and I was tripping around backstage, and I'm entering from the wrong side of stage, and so I said, this is not for me. You know, I cannot do that. I can't think straight. And I think I went to acting class once kind of high and did a scene, and it was like everything was in slow motion. It was terrible, you know.
It wasn't for you. You
No,
couldn't push through.
Didn't enhance me. And I know professional Broadway actors who would smoke a joint on the way to work.
Yeah.
To do a show, and were fantastic,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and film actors too. So it's like to each their own. And but I had a certain discipline about work.
Yeah.
And then there was playtime, and that's when I finished the job, then I would, you know, we had a bunch of pals and stunt people that I hung out with. We called it the fun club, you know, and no bozos, and it was just we'd party and drink and play around and have fun. But then when it came time to work again, you know, you had to really, you couldn't. It didn't fit in my life, because an actor has to work so long and so hard, so many hours, and then you have to come back and prepare the next day's work or the next, you know, and on the weekend you prepare for the full week that's coming, and then work on the day by day as you go through it. So for me, and maybe I'm just you know, not quick enough, but it's just I needed the time. I really like to take the time to know what I'm doing, and I think I got that from Lucille Ball.
Mm-hmm.
She said to me, if you want to be a star, you got to act like a star. And I was a little, you know, I said, okay, you know, and I tried to digest what did she mean by that. And I think what she meant to me was bring it. Like, you know, if the studio wants to know what you want to do, tell them. If you want to give a great performance, bring it to the set. Don't think you're going to get lucky. The director's going to help you get, you know, I mean, come in with it prepared, be loose enough to shift around, but bring a great performance in the door. It doesn't just happen by accident. And so I always felt that sense of discipline was important to me. And then I learned improv, and I learned to let go, you know, but you still prepare. And, you know, improv doesn't just mean everybody just gets up there and tries to be funny. There's games. Everybody's got a game, you know? I mean, and your attention is focused on things, and so there's always rules to the sport, you know? And yeah, so I did try to stay disciplined. I still do.
It's like that even kind of comes through with your Marine Corps stories. Like, so there's always some level of discipline throughout your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess my mother was very disciplined. I mean, she was doing 2 full-time jobs. I mean, she didn't have time to do anything to play around. And my sister was always very disciplined, and I guess my dad not so much.
Yeah.
You know, but he just sort of drifted around from job to job and in Arizona, and you know, I would just see him sporadically. But yeah, so it has been a real, you know, and then the other thing too was I realized I needed to stay in good shape to be an actor, because I remember my friend, a director, showed me a picture of an actor who I was always competing with, and he had his shirt off and he looked terrible. And he said,
we won't name names.
No, I'm not going to mention. And he said, and we used to, and he and I shared our garage gyms. His agent had given him a full gym full of equipment, which wouldn't fit in his garage or mine. So we split it and put half and half, and we would trade off going from garage to garage. And I just realized I don't want to look like that. You know, I mean, I have to take my shirt off for a living.
I was going to say Animal House was like.
Yeah, Belushi laughed at me. He said, well, I had a slant board I brought up there. He said, what's that for? I said, I got to take my shirt off.
One of the things that, and talking about somebody that you competed against, yet you shared a gym. One of the things that Renee and I were talking about this morning is you seem to stay friends with everyone. Like I mean, the stories that are in the book about, you know, people like I don't know, I got kind of teary when you talked about Richard Dreyfuss before anyone knew who Richard Dreyfuss, and that you're still friends. Do you think, I mean, is that something that still happens? Is it bygone days, or was it something really important and personal to you? It seems like you have stayed close and friendly and you know, with a lot of people that you worked with and you worked for, and how important was that?
And you all championed each other.
Yeah, and really
Yeah.
even talking about. I loved your stories about oh my gosh. That you were competing with. I'll think of it in a second. That you were Goldie Hawn's husband.
Kurt
Russell. That you were competing with Kurt Russell, and that, you know, that you guys, even though you stayed friends.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, I just think that whole storyline is really, really interesting in the book.
Well, I mean, the thing with Kurt was he was a jock.
Yeah.
You know, he was a baseball player.
Yeah.
And he was a kid actor whose father was a baseball player and an actor. So he grew up second generation actor, second generation baseball player. He played, after his success as a kid actor, he said, I'm going to go play ball now. And he threw out his shoulder. He got hit in the shoulder and had a rotator cuff injury, and that meant then you're out.
Right.
So he went back to acting, and he was he taught me that it's a team, you know. I mean, we did the Quest, and it was about these 2 brothers, and I remember we did all this publicity, and we did, you know, the brother shots and everything, and we heard that the calendar section of the LA Times, the TV guide section, was going to have a picture of our show on the cover on Sunday, and I couldn't wait to see it. And Sunday comes around, and I open the paper, and it's a picture of Kurt on a horse. And it was like, I said, okay, I get it. I mean, he's a bigger name than me. You know, okay. And it stung, but, you know, it's showbiz. Okay. So I go to work on Monday, and I hear some voices, some loud voices in the back of the stage. And I walk back to see what's going on. People are, you know, somebody's raising her voice and yelling at somebody. And it was Kurt. And he was telling the PR guy, he said, don't ever do that again. Don't let that happen. They should not have a picture of just me. We are a show of brothers, and if you can't get us both on it, don't put anything up there. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine another actor acting like that, you know. And he said, we're a team. So don't mess with the team, you know. And we just took care of each other like that. And I learned, and on that show I learned again the hard way that it wasn't all just about me and my acting and all this. It was about everybody on the set, and you have to really put your arms around the entire family, because it takes everybody on that crew, every man and woman on that crew, to make the show and to make you as good as you can be, and that's why they're there, whether they know it or
Yeah.
not, you know. So Kurt was such an instrument in teaching me that, and have fun, you know, and actually had more pragmatic things that I learned about acting from him than I did in any acting class. I mean, he was like, I was studying, and you know, it was really every chance I had a chance to, even in a lighting rehearsal, I would work a scene and really act it, and you know, and he said, you know, like, if you don't mind my saying it, you're gonna kill yourself. You're gonna wear yourself out. We're gonna do 15 episodes of this,
Right.
and if you work that hard, it's gonna
Yeah.
be 6 months. You know, you won't, you'll get sick. You know, just ease into it and save it for the camera, and then you'll have it. You can just, you know, protect yourself. And he also said another thing that was really interesting. He said, you know, in all the movies I've done and everything, there's usually only about 3 or 4, maybe 5 scenes in the whole movie that they're really important and really important for my character to do something, that I can do something as an actor with. The rest of it is just sort of there. You know, it's story, but they're not A scenes, they're B or C scenes. And I just thought, that is a really smart way of looking at the landscape of your work, you know, because I look at it, and it translated to me as a director. There's A material, which is the big star
Yeah.
scenes, and they're key to the story. There's B scenes, which are, yeah, it's important, but it's, you know, C scenes are like, let's get through this, you know,
Yeah.
let's just, it's not, you know, maybe they'll even get cut, but it's not a plot point. It's just, but let's just, you don't have to devote too much of your day to this. And he had that perspective about himself as an actor, and imparted that to me, and, you know, and he's a funny guy.
When you, just to kind of shift, you know, when did you start getting the bug for directing? You know,
I'd always had, I
It's
always
like-
wanted to be a director, and then the acting thing took off.
Oh.
And when I was under contract to Universal, I got an editing room from them, and I went and shot some movies, and tried to get into film school and couldn't. So I said, I realized, well, I'm here, you know, I'm working with all these directors. I might as well just counsel with them and learn, you know. So I picked their brain
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to be. And then I had kind of had my heart broken. I saw some movies, and I bought the rights to a series of Japanese movies called Zatoichi,
Mhm.
which is about the most successful series of films ever made in Japan. They made, I don't know, 13 of the features, and they made 100 episodes of a series, and it was the most charming character. It was a blind samurai swordsman with a cane, and he was kind of chubby and goofy and funny, and you know, but in that cane was a sword, and don't mess with him, and don't hurt anybody who's an innocent, a child, a woman, or you know, somebody who's a bully, would bully them, you know, try to rob some people, you know, and he would, you know, and then and he would never be an aggressor, but if somebody did something, out would come the sword, you know, and he was better than, you know, and he could hear better than we could see, you know, so it was just this great. And I bought the rights, and I said, I just want to make an American version of this. And we got a writer friend of mine. We did a script. We got a producing partner, which we thought we needed to get the movie made and to help sell it. And then we hired, you know, and when you go with a studio, you know, you get your top choice for a director, or you work your way down a list until you get somebody who'll say yes, that they'll approve. And so we got this guy. He's a wonderful director now, Phil Noyce, an Australian, and we couldn't get Don Johnson or Ricky Rourke, so we got Rutger Hauer, who was wonderful, but neither the director nor that actor were right for the picture. and didn't particularly want to. They wouldn't look at the original movies that I said, we just got to make this movie. It's just, it's there. Let's just make that movie an American movie. No. So that movie came out and just tanked, and I just said, you know what, I can do it better than that. I mean, I know, I trust my gut, and you know, I went in, and I made a lot of mistakes as a director, but not being prepared and not doing research and not knowing, you know, I mean, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and all good directors study old films, and how Lucas, when he was shooting Star Wars, was looking at American war movies, air battles that with the Americans and the Japanese fighting, and he modeled his shots after those movies. You know, I mean, that's and Star Wars is based on Hidden Fortress, a Kurosawa movie, which is we take these characters and we get them into a situation from which there is no escape, and then we get them out. And that's what they did, you know? And that, I mean, so if it's good enough for George, it's good enough for me. So, yeah.
So with St. Elsewhere, that was your directorial debut.
Yes,
And so,
yes.
So with that movie, you had talked a little bit about how you learned on that set that you really had such a view as an actor. And that's what you took into being a director, which is kind of opened your eyes to what a director actually does.
Yes.
How, you know, and then, you know, additionally, you know, you've worked with some amazing directors
Yes.
in your time over the 6.5 decades. How do you describe yourself as a director now? You know, you talked a lot about what you learned from them, but who is Tim Matheson, the director?
It's interesting because I've gotten away from directing because when doing Virgin River, I directed 2 episodes each the first 2 years, and then I sort of begged off because it was so hard to do both acting and directing on that schedule, and so I don't have to direct it anymore, and so I've really gotten away from directing. I like comedies. I like genre films. I horror films. I had let's see, the most fun I directed a movie called Buried Alive 2, which was a sequel to a Buried Alive, which I did with Frank Darabont, directed, from Shawshank Redemption. Wonderful writer and director. I like, you know, I sort of like Howard Hawks style movies where smart people are fast and funny, and it's sort of like The West Wing. I thought of that as a Howard Hawks type movie where smart people, romantic comedy, you know, like with CJ and Tim Busfield had that relationship, you know. That was very Howard Hawksian to me, and I played my character like that and you played a walk and talk, no cuts, that went on for 2.5 minutes. And you need a real good actor. You need real good actors to do that. You know, because they're fast and there's no cuts. You know, and you can't. If somebody drops a line or somebody does this or that, do it again. You know, and you can wear them out. So it's really important. Those are the kind of things that attract me. It's a great script, and it's really hard to find and develop. You know.
Yeah. Talking about The West Wing, you talked a lot about quite a bit, and throughout a couple chapters, your relationship with John Spencer. And just the mentorship that, you know, and the camaraderie he had in terms of talking about openness and vulnerability and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, John Spencer was a saint. He was such a good actor. Yeah. And without acting. You know, I mean, it was just what I think Henry Fonda told me about acting. He said, you walk in. I said, what is it? How do you do it? And he goes, you walk in the room, you hit your mark, you look them in the eye, and you tell them the truth. And it was like, okay, that's what Henry did. I mean, you know, and that's what John Spencer did. Yeah. And he just even opened. He was his heart was just open all the time, you know, and it put me at ease often because when I was only in, say, a third of the episodes, so I would be gone for 4 or 5 weeks or 4 or 5 episodes, and then I'd come back and I'd have big scenes and stuff, and that's like playing at Wimbledon with those guys. You know, they've been playing, and then all of a sudden you drop in. You can't change a word. You can't change punctuation. I had a script supervisor say, that is a semicolon, not a period. And I
I
went,
wouldn't even know what to do with that.
oh, don't make a full stop.
Like if somebody said that to me, I'd be like, I have to think about that.
and that's Aaron Sorkin being in the theater.
Yeah.
You know, it's these words work, and he has a rhythm to it. And John was just so helpful because he just looked at me. You know, when we had scenes together, I had a lot of stuff with him, and because he was sort of my only ally on the show, I think. You know, in a funny way, in the story.
Oh, I was going to say, I was like,
No, I mean, I loved everybody on
but in
that.
the story, that makes sense. Yeah.
In the story, he
For
was
who
my
John
only
Hoynes was, yeah.
ally. That
Yeah.
he didn't judge me as harshly as Bartlett did, you know. And he also opened up to me. We did an episode where they finally let Hoynes have, you know, some humanity, where John was going through, his character was going through some very hard times with his wife, and it was going on. And I said to him, "What's going on with you?" And he had admitted he's an alcoholic and he's having a problem. And my character said, "I want you to come to a meeting with me." And I admitted that I was an alcoholic, and my character was an alcoholic, and I took him to a private meeting, and we bonded through that. And he told me about the first time he really is an alcoholic, and the first time he'd ever done a movie sober was Presumed Innocent, and with Harrison Ford, this incredible scene. And he said, "I didn't know if I could do it." And he's so good in it, you know. It just touches me today. I mean, so he sort of saved me on that show. And whenever I'd go on the set, if I got a little nervous, I'd just look at John, and it was like, okay.
I was going to say,
Now we can be ourselves.
Yeah.
the dialogue on that show is no joke.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't imagine the rehearsing.
Oh yeah, it was, and you know, and it, of all the shows I've done, it's perhaps one of the only shows that really you should say every word as it's written.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise, sort of maybe yes, maybe no. I mean, or you know, you could loosen it up a bit. You know, but with Aaron, no.
The Newsroom was the same way too.
Yeah.
Did you watch
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you watch
Everything
the-
that- everything that he does.
Yeah.
So, Tim, as you were going back and all of these amazing stories that are in the book, were there memories or were there things that you revisited that kind of surprised you, or that I mean, you lived them, but maybe hadn't thought of them for a long time? Were there things that were really great to kind of remember as you were going through the book? Because there's a lot of great stories.
Oh, thanks. Well, yes, and one of the things I think a great discovery for me was the realization that, and I talked about Phil Stutz, who was a
Yeah.
psychiatrist that I
Mhm.
visited numerous times, and who was recommended to me by several people in the industry. Said, "This is the guy. You really, you know." And they made a documentary about him a couple of years ago, an Oscar-nominated a film about him, and he made me aware that I was allowing people to be around me that didn't really support me, that weren't really friends to me in business and in personal life, and it all came together, and I talked about it in here, and it helped me realize that I just need to eliminate those people from my life and my work, and don't open up to that. You know, don't give yourself up to that, because it's just negative energy around you if you have people that aren't rooting for you.
Yeah.
Or, you know. So I think that was one of the great discoveries, that I sort of, oh, that's what happened. That's what that was. And yes, and I could now I sort of see the thread of the evolutionary thread, and you know, that I was a terrible. I got married when I was 19, and I was a terrible husband. I was just stupid, you know. And we weren't really meant to be together, and it was one of those things. But I'm not proud of the way I behaved, and I was not proud of the way I behaved towards one girlfriend, and ruined a relationship that could have been an important relationship, was an important relationship in my life, and and the way I treated her was not good. And so it was almost a relief to be able to own it. Wow, I did not behave well, you know, and I won't ever do that again. But if you don't have it in front of you, it's like, it wasn't so bad. I mean, you know, oh, I can put that out of my mind, you know, and so
But you have it all right
You can
here.
block
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's sort of confession.
I was gonna say this is you put a lot into the book in terms of, you know, was it writing this book cathartic for you? And
Totally,
yeah,
totally, and you know, there's a lot of things I took out that, you know, people, certain people that were working on with me would say, you know, that might not. Here's what, like, there was a story about a girlfriend I had, and we won't go into the details, but I said we could do that, and he said, you know, she could say, oh, that's not what happened. It happened this way, and he's the bad guy, you know. And I said, I got it. Okay, so let's cut it. I said, well, I don't need to tell that story. I mean, it was a horrible relationship, but and it was better left unsaid, you know. So there was things that were eliminated in that way, but I just tried to keep it all, you know, balanced, you know, and if I stepped in a pothole, I wanted, hopefully people will, you know, can avoid that pothole.
Well, you own your potholes too.
I was gonna
think
say
is
that's the third
yeah.
theme.
Yeah.
Yes.
Accountability.
Yes.
I was like, you
exactly.
put a lot, so much in here but at the same time, you're so self-aware, like throughout the book. And it's something that you can definitely see from beginning to end in terms of you taking accountability for all of your choices and, you know, all of the things that you had to push through and the choices you made, even when, you know, you were taking a break from, you know, you come off of one show and you say no to another show because you just needed a month break. But, you know, I think across the board, that's something that resonates in this, that you know, that you really put your heart and soul into the book, into the words that you chose, into the stories you chose. You know, it's just a phenomenal book.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I just didn't want to, I mean, like, I never acknowledged, and I didn't want to ever talk about the fact that I turned down moonlighting. You know, it's like, what a stupid thing to do. You know, I mean, seriously. And then,
but you went to Hawaii, right?
no, I went just rafting in Utah.
Oh, I was like, there was another one that you went to Hawaii.
Well, that was I was on Fletch. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I took my mom and my sister to. My sister got her.
When they were the reshoot.
When
She passed the bar.
Yeah.
And
She
you were
passed the
unavailable.
bar in Honolulu, so she got her permit over there. But yeah, and I mean, it's like now it's like, okay, I did that. Yeah, I did that because the more I listen to a lot of actors, they talk about all the things that they've done like that, you know, and it's like it happens, you know, and
those are great. Those are great stories.
Yeah.
What with the work you're doing now with Virgin River and with Heart of Dixie, do you think that the young actors that are coming up now, is there an opportunity from now going forward for someone to have a 6-decade career? Are we so, I don't know, disposable as a culture, or so
There's also so much more content.
so much more content coming out? Is that opportunity for people like you to have, you know, who've had this wonderful long career, like you said, you've pivoted, you've been in front of the camera, behind the camera, you know, comedy, genre, all of these. Is that opportunity still there for young actors coming up now? Do you think that's still there?
I think so, absolutely.
I love that. Okay.
I think that the trick I had, or just sort of the evolution I had, was that about every 7 years I had to reinvent myself.
Yeah.
And it just sort of happened that way. And whether it was by design or by hitting a wall, you know, and I think that it's something that all actors have to do, or writers or producers or whatever has to do, because you do something and you do, you get known for this now, you can do that thing, and everybody wants you to do that thing, and then that thing runs its course, and then you want to do that thing, but they say, we're not making those anymore, you know, or that shows, no, that style is gone. So you have to kind of stay a little beat ahead of the curve, or just be prepared to shift around a little bit. I think that's, you know, it's like a lot of actors now, they go back to the theater. You go back to, you know, go back and I challenged myself with Shakespeare, and because I thought if I can learn how to do that well, anything in television or movies, that's easier, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, or it'll help me dig in to the same degree I have to with Shakespeare to be better when I do that, you know. So it's a discipline that I learned from playing Shakespeare that I could apply to my day-to-day work. And I think as long as an actor or a director or a writer keeps growing and shifting and transitioning and transforming, then you can just keep going, you know.
Good. I love that.
I mean, I think it's up to us.
Yeah.
So you don't just, you know, oh no, we don't let that. I know you do that thing, but we don't have to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
As you kind of were like wrapping the book, one of the things that you had really talked about just was your fatal flaw was confrontation.
Yes.
And I think in terms of our audience and our community that listens to the podcast and our summits and so forth, you know, how did you kind of take the baby steps to start getting like moving through that in terms of confrontation? Just because how do they advocate for themselves? You know, at what point, you know, I think you had 2 stories in the book, one of which I'm forgetting one, but one of them was on Heart of Dixie, where you seem to handle work conflict in some ways really well, where if somebody couldn't settle something like with the Heart of Dixie and you were supposed to shoot a pilot, you were just like, I'm just going to deal with this. And you picked up the phone and then you have that confrontation, that type of confrontation you do really well, but, you know, married with kind of getting rid of the people who were, you know, less positive in your life. How did that kind of come together for you? How did you tackle that?
It was probably easier to do in work than in personal life because there's one friend of mine who I'd grown up with, you know, and then at some point I realized that he'd really never been fully my supporter, you know.
Yeah.
Thought he was a better actor, but he just, you know, this had happened and he got pulled away from acting. And had he been an actor, given the breaks that I was given, he'd be a better actor than me. And you know, that whole, and he was always putting down one way or another, you know. And it was harder because I went to visit him at one point with my sister and then another time with my wife now, Elizabeth. And we came away and they said, he's not treating you nicely. He's mean to you. And I said, oh, no. I mean, he's, you know, really? You know, I mean, I just covered it up because he's family. I loved him, you know. And it was like, I didn't want to lose that. And then, so I've tried to be better at that. And this has helped me be better with that. And tried to be honest about my divorce and my behavior and, you know, and hopefully, and be more straightforward about my feelings. Be in touch with my feelings is really the thing. Is just be in touch with your feelings. And when somebody's not nice to you, you can just, I mean, as Bruce Paltrow said to me, and you can get away with saying anything as long as it's funny. You know, it's like somebody doesn't get up and I was talking to somebody the other day who said, I walk in the room and she just sits there, doesn't even look at me, doesn't even, you know, and I walked in, you know, this is my sister-in-law. And I say, whoa, hey, what's going on here? Are you pissed at me? Hey, I mean, I said, hi, you know, I just want to say, are you angry at me? You didn't get up? I mean, lay it on the table. And so I try and do it with humor, you know, and sometimes I don't make it, but you know.
Sometimes jokes don't land.
Yes, right. Yeah. Oops, okay. But at least you brought it up.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can't believe we're out of time. This has been such a great conversation.
So wonderful talking to you guys.
Oh my gosh,
It's
Tim, thank you
fantastic.
so much for being here. I
Really.
love the book.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, it's been such a pleasure. As we had talked about, it's like I saw Animal House when I was maybe 9, 10.
I love that. I love your parents already.
Like, Animal House and Die Hard. Those are my dad's.
the two.
My dad's like, this is what we're doing on a Friday night.
Seeing Animal House and Fletch.
It's a bonding.
Fletch.
You know, so many people that
Oh my gosh.
when I see younger people tell me, oh, I saw Animal House. I said, how old were you? And he said, well, so my dad took me and said, and don't tell your mother.
yeah.
Right.
Oh,
right,
100%.
exactly.
Right? And,
100%.
and I said, how old? And they said, it's usually between sometimes 9
9.
and 12. And I said, that's a bond that you
Yep.
guys have. And it's just so good.
It's, but it's funny because it's like, I think back on like some of the shows and the movies that came out, they just can't make them like that anymore. Like in some ways, the content has shifted. I don't know if you made Animal House now for what was in that movie, I don't know if you could get away with it.
Tell me, okay, let's talk, because this is Lampoon. I mean, this is what the Lampoon.
Yeah, this is Lampoon.
was their-
This is what Lampoon did,
Yeah.
which was they were making fun of, first of all, we shot it in 78. It was
Yeah.
about 1962.
Yeah.
So the way they get away with it is we're not like that now.
Anymore.
Yeah.
That's the way they were. That's the way those
That was 10
white
years ago.
kids
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
then.
That was
you
10
know?
years ago, guys.
And they, and I think that, that movie, they tried to cut that scene. I think I told in the book, the Roadhouse scene where all the
Oh.
white students
Yeah.
showed up.
take
at
their
the-
dates and go to the black nightclub
Yeah.
where there are no whites there. And they said, and he said, oh, don't worry. Otis loves us. We walk in and this entire house turns and looks at us and goes, oh, what are these white kids, these privileged white kids doing here? And then you see, do you mind if we dance with your dates?
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
happens. And I'm out, snaking in the car with the phony date I got, the dead girl, out of sympathy. And then the studio looked at that scene and they said, there's going to be riots in the theaters. From black audiences will riot when they see this. This is racist, and it's objective. It's not good, and so we have to cut it out. And the younger executives said, okay, but we'll talk about it. And they went and got Richard Pryor, the great black comic,
Mhm.
and they said, Richard, we've got an issue here. I want you to look at a movie, if you wouldn't mind, and tell us if this is offensive. And he said, okay. And he looks at the movie and he said, no, what do you think? And he said, let me talk to Ned. Let's go see Ned, the head of the studio. And he walks in and he goes, he says, you white people are crazy. That's funny. That's a funny scene. Leave it alone, because it was about privileged white kids learning about culture,
Right,
and that they're privileged. And and they're making more fun of them than as much fun of them as they were the black characters. That was Lampoon,
Yeah.
and so
Got away.
can you do that today? I don't know. I think you
Yeah.
have to be, but I also think if it's done in the right way, it was a sexist movie as well,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
and there weren't any black members of the Delta House, except that the only thing about the Delta House, which was our fraternity, was anybody could get in. Today you'd make it more
Yeah.
interracial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then the thing that made us different than all other fraternities was we'd let anybody in.
Yeah.
When they put up Flounder and and I said, hey, he wants to get in. He got to get in.
Yeah.
We let him in. Are you kidding? So, and the other ones, the other guys, we made fun of them as they ran him to a corner where there was an Indian Jugdesh over there sitting with the Indian and I think a blind kid and perhaps an African American.
Like the first,
That was
it was like
all
scene
that,
number one.
it was so offensive
Yeah.
what they did there and so funny, and that was that sort of racist, stereotypical, fraternity thing. So that's Lampoon.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to see that because I'd love to see. I like kind of borderline offensive stuff
Yeah.
like that.
It's like we were talking about your anecdote around going to the SAE party before.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my god.
So bad. Don't tell him. I was like, oh, my sons are SAEs. Not from
My
the
brother's
South.
an SAE.
And our brother's in SAE. And we were like, oh my God, they were
gosh.
so
Well,
awful
this
in
was
Oregon.
but we walked in like we were, privileged
yeah.
actors.
Yeah, like everybody would welcome the.
Yeah.
Like,
you
it's
know,
awesome. These guys
Yeah.
are here.
Yeah.
Hey, we're
They
blessing
were
you with our
jealous.
presence.
Yes.
And they were drunk.
threatened. Yeah, and they were drunk.
And I think the guy who saved my life he must have been the only Mormon there or something, it's like one of the few instances of a miracle in my life. That happened. It was just
Oh my
like,
gosh.
oh my God, he just out of nowhere, just hey guys, relax.
Yeah. Well, and the Bruce
Oh,
McGill
really?
story there was so great.
Yeah.
It was so great. I love him. He's so
Oh,
fun.
he's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, Tim,
Tim,
thank you so
Thank
much
you so
for
much. This
giving
is-
us
Yeah.
giving us the hook. We've got to go. This was so great. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
you.
Gretchen. Thank you, Renee. Thank you
Thank you
both
so
very
much.
much. It was a pleasure. You guys are fabulous.
Oh my gosh,
Well,
thank you
thank
so
you.
Oh my
much.
God.